these jailbirds kept their sentences on the down low. Today, we're counting down the top 10 celebs you didn't know went to jail. In her early days of fame, Khloe Kardashian was arrested for driving under the influence in 2007. She was ordered to undergo community service and complete an alcohol education course, but she failed to enroll in the course, which violated her parole. The court sentenced her to 30 days in jail. Luckily for Khloe, she only spent less than 3 hours in jail. She was taken into the Linwood, California jail for women at 10:36 a.m. and released at 1:29 p.m. per the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. The city's jails have a policy to release nonviolent offenders due to overcrowding. The Beatles' bassist and singer Paul McCartney was arrested at a Tokyo airport in January 1980 for possession of almost a half a pound of marijuana. He was in Japan to start an 11-city tour throughout the country with his new band, Wings. The amount of weed in his possession meant that Paul could catch a smuggling charge, a conviction that could lead to a 7-year prison sentence. But being famous has its perks, and Paul was held in the Tokyo Narcotics Detention Center for 9 days before being deported back to England. While in prison, he was known as Prisoner Number 22. Mike Tyson is back in the news thanks to his upcoming fight with Jake Paul. The former heavyweight champion was arrested in July 1991 for raping an 18-year-old woman in an Indianapolis hotel room. After 10 hours of deliberation, he was convicted on the charge of rape. Mike was sentenced to 6 years in prison with 4 years of probation. After serving less than half of his sentence, he was released from the Plainville Correctional Facility. Due to his conviction, he was required to register as a Tier 2 sex offender under federal law. Chris Brown has a history of violence. In 2009, his assault of Rihanna led to her hospitalization, and Chris turned himself into the police. He pleaded guilty to felony assault and accepted a plea deal of community labor, 5 years of probation, and domestic violence counseling. In 2013, his parole was revoked following a hit and run in Los Angeles. 3 months later, he was arrested for felony assault after punching a man who asked to take a picture with him. The charge was reduced to a misdemeanor, and Chris spent 36 hours in a Washington jail. Paris Hilton was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence while on her way to In-N-Out. She pleaded down to reckless driving in January 2007 and was sentenced to 3 years probation. But a month later, she was pulled over for speeding and not using headlights. Paris was cited for driving with a suspended license and had her $190,000 Bentley Continental GTC impounded. In May 2007, Paris was sentenced to 45 days in prison and had to turn herself in on June 5th. But 2 days later, her lawyer secured a reassignment to monitored house arrest for 40 days. She was picked up at home the next day and brought to prison to serve the remainder of her sentence due to the prosecution overriding the sheriff who signed her house arrest papers. As a main cast member of Jersey Shore, Mike "The Situation" Sorrentino became the second highest paid reality star of 2010, second only to Kim Kardashian. In September 2014, he was charged with tax fraud for failing to pay income tax on about $8.9 million in earnings. Charges of tax evasion would be added to his list of crimes in April 2017, leading The Situation to accept a plea bargain in January 2018 for 1 count of tax evasion. In January 2019, he was sent to the Federal Correctional Institution in Otisville, New York, to complete an 8-month prison sentence. He was released in September of the same year. The Fast and the Furious star, Michelle Rodriguez, pleaded no contest to charges of hit and run, driving under the influence, and driving with a suspended license in June 2004. This landed her in jail for a whopping 48 hours. While filming Lost in Hawaii a year later, Michelle was arrested again on suspicion of driving under the influence. She pleaded guilty to the charges and spent 5 days in jail. In an October 2007 hearing, Michelle admitted to violating the terms of her probation and was sentenced to 180 days in jail. Due to prison overcrowding, she only spent 18 days in jail. In 1989, the future Mr. Robot actor Christian Slater was arrested for driving under the influence. He was jailed for 10 days and later said, "Work is my hobby, staying sober is my job." In 1994, he was arrested after trying to board a plane with a gun in his baggage. He was sentenced to 3 days of community service. In 1997, Christian was convicted of assaulting his girlfriend and a police officer while under the influence of heroin, cocaine, and alcohol. While on bail, he spent over 100 days in a rehab facility and then sentenced to 3 months in prison. He was released after 59 days for good behavior. Rapper and Fyre Fest co-founder Ja Rule was sentenced to 2 years in prison in December 2010 for possession of a firearm. He surrendered himself into custody at Rikers Island in New York in June 2011. A month later, while serving time for a firearm charge, he was given an additional 28 months in prison for failing to pay income taxes on approximately $3 million in earnings. Lori Loughlin was the poster child for the Operation Varsity Blues scandal, where rich parents bribed their children's way into college. But Desperate Housewives star Felicity Huffman was also involved. She was accused of disguising a $15,000 payment as a charitable donation, while it was actually a payment for someone to take her daughter's SATs for her. Felicity pleaded guilty to 1 count of mail fraud and honest services fraud. She was sentenced to 14 days in jail, a year of supervised release, a $30,000 fine, and 250 hours of community service.